Welcome to this webinar on mistakes in win-win negotiations. What we're going to do is to have a brief introduction of myself and what we're going to do next. And then we're going to describe several mistakes in win-win negotiations. When you sign up for this webinar, you might have seen the title 10 mistakes in win-win negotiations. I'm actually taking the 10 out. I thought of putting another number, but I'm proposing you to decide how many mistakes we're going to discuss. So it's a challenge for you. I'm putting the burden on you, responsibility on you, to find how many mistakes in win-win negotiations we talk about over the next hour or so. We're going to have some space for questions and answers at the end, and then I'll ask you also to summarize your key takeaways from the program. This webinar has been developed by Católica Lisbon and with the sponsorship of the European Investment Bank Institute, with whom Católica has developed the Social Innovation Tournament Impact Bootcamp, on which I've been teaching over the last few years. And some of you, I guess, are participants from that bootcamp that are now here to have a refresh on negotiations. You may know, some of you who know me already, that I also teach at INSEAD, one of the best business schools in the world, and the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, the top public administration university in Asia. It's great to see some familiar faces joining the webinar. I'm also an entrepreneur. I've started Pluris, a small boutique negotiation consulting firm. Basically what we do is to help clients in their toughest negotiations. We help them prepare for those negotiations. We train them on negotiation skills. We coach them on how to get to the best results over the process of negotiating. And I also started SportImpact, a social enterprise with the mission of human development through sport. Some of you may have done the pre-training questionnaire, a questionnaire with 20 questions on negotiations, testing your pre-knowledge of negotiations before this webinar. You may have had very poor results in that pre-training questionnaire. I must say that the average historical of hundreds of people who have responded to the questionnaire, the average score is 8.7. So below 10 is not uncommon. And I think the historical best score ever is 17 for someone who has not done this training questionnaire before. So congratulations for having done the questionnaire. We're not going to cover the questionnaire in this webinar in an explicit way, but we're going to cover it in an implicit way. So we're going to discuss several guidelines, advice, tools that will help you get better at scoring in that pre-training questionnaire. We're actually going to challenge you after the webinar to do the post-training questionnaire, which is exactly the same 20 questions, but now you have the benefit of the webinar, and we trust that your score will improve. And then you'll get also, as a compensation, a full comprehensive answer sheet with all the responses of why certain responses were wrong and why only one was correct. Some of the key questions that most of you failed in this questionnaire were about what does win-lose mean, what does win-win mean, why do we negotiate? And some of us answering this questionnaire, we say that we negotiate to get improved value for everyone. And you can guess by the end of the webinar that the right answer is that we negotiate to get more value for ourselves. And hopefully others also will benefit from that. And we must define win-lose or win-win, otherwise we cannot discuss what mistakes in win-win negotiations are. So let me propose a small definitions here. Win-lose versus win-win, what does that mean? And please take note, because these are the right answers for your post-training questionnaire. So win-lose is basically an adjective that qualifies the intention to get what we want in negotiations by using power, by coercing others, forcing others to give us what we want. Win-win, you might guess, it's just the opposite of that, is getting the intention to get what we want without using power. As simple as that. One mistake we commonly do in negotiations is to forget that this is the most basic choice we have in negotiations. Do we choose to go for win-lose, meaning we'll use power to get what we want, or do we go for win-win? Do you not use power to get what we want? If we know this is the choice, if we make it a conscious choice, then we decide what's the best strategy. Because if we decide to use power, then our strategy involves maximizing our power and applying it in a more effective way. If we decide not to use power, then probably we'll have to communicate in more productive ways, more collaborative ways to get what we want jointly with the other party we're negotiating with, our counterpart. Something we also forget sometimes is that we think sometimes that we can use a little bit of power, just a little bit of power in our negotiations. We think that applying a bit of power when we have some leverage, we have some more knowledge, some more information, bigger budget, we are stronger than the other side, we apply that little power to get a certain advantage, and we think we have the illusion that we can do that and then go back to collaborative win-win negotiations. But power is a bit like poison. Imagine you have a cup of water, like I have water inside. I'm drinking. Imagine I put a drop of poison in this water. Should I drink it? Probably not. Am I able to clean it up to be able to drink it? Maybe with very sophisticated technology, probably a bad idea. Probably I just should scrap this water and not drinking it anymore. And that's the same with negotiations. If we lose a little power, so we use a little bit of win-lose, then it's very difficult, if not impossible, to go back to win-win. So we have this illusion that we can apply a little power without destroying the win-win dynamics. The advice here is to choose win-win strategies and avoid spoiling the win-win with that little drop of power. Here is the main structure we're going to use in this webinar. And some of you who have taken courses with me or similar courses may know this framework already, hopefully. It's the negotiation map, which involves 7 elements of negotiation. And they're divided into 3 stages. The first stage is the bridge, which involves relationship, making sure there's a good connection between the 2 parties, and communication. There's good two-way communication between the 2 parties negotiating. Then we move to the second stage, the value pursuit, where we look for the interest, what the parties care about, what could be options, solutions to satisfy the interests of the parties, and then legitimacy. How do we justify which ones are the right, appropriate, fair options to agree on? Finally, we're ready to take action, to make a decision. We either shake hands and we commit, or we pursue our alternatives. What we're going to do in this webinar is to go through each of the 7 elements of negotiation in this map and discuss certain mistakes we tend to make when we do this in a win-win approach and some advice of what we could do instead. This map is associated also with this negotiation canvas that you see here in this slide. And some of you also who have taken courses with me are familiar with this tool. It's a tool to help us prepare more effectively for a negotiation by ticking all the boxes of things we should take into consideration when we prepare for a negotiation, with certain keywords and trigger questions to help us prepare for those negotiations. I'm not going to use the canvas explicitly, but when you get the materials from this workshop, from this webinar, which will be shared after the webinar, you can click on this slide and download the canvas for your use in your negotiation. So let's start with relationship. And relationship is the ability to work together in a negotiation. Let's watch a quick video that shows some of the mistakes we may do sometimes in negotiations. So what do you think of this video? You may guess that ironically, this is a telecom company ad. And telecoms are sometimes a good disruptor of relationships. Sometimes we make the mistake of being complacent. We assume that relationships take care of themselves. They basically are there and will be there no matter what we do. A colleague of mine in INSEAD MBA, he's the director of an insurance company in Singapore. He was telling me some time ago how he earned a contract with a Japanese client, although his company did not have the best commercial proposal to their clients, they were the ones chosen. And they asked the client, how come you chose our proposal? We know that our competitors have better commercial terms than what we offer you. And the client said, look, in the meetings with your competitors, they were using their iPhones the whole time in our meetings. We thought, if this is how they treat us when they're trying to sell us business, imagine when we're clients already. So we have to be careful about how we take care of relationships, and technology can be one of the disruptors, but sometimes it's just ignorance of the relationship and not addressing it regularly that just makes it go into a routine mode that ends up undermining the connection we have with each other, with our counterparts. Let me propose an exercise, because trust is an important tool or characteristic of a solid relationship. I'm going to propose that we write, and I hope that you have paper and pen. There's things that are still used sometimes around the world, not only computers. And we're going to write trust on a piece of paper. So get a piece of paper that you can discard and write trust with the nicest letters you can write. I'm going to do it here as well, and I'll show you my art. So get a piece of paper, get a pen or a marker, and write trust on it. And please do it. I'm going to ask you, those of you who have the camera on, to show it on camera. So this is my piece of art. This is my trust. Let's see how you do it. If you don't have your camera on, still do it. It's going to be a much more valuable answer. Thank you, Gabriela. Very nice. Trust is very important, but not necessarily the most important thing to have in a negotiation. Very nice piece of art. Sometimes we start relationships, and normally when we start, we don't have trust on each other. Basically, we have to start something from zero. And therefore, if we believe that we need trust, then we might end up not negotiating at all because we don't have trust to start with. So how do we start negotiating? At least on a win-win way. So to get more detached from trust, I'm going to ask you now to just wrap your trust into pieces, okay, as small as possible. And I see the pain in some of your eyes. I'm sorry for making you do this. Let's make it small pieces. Let's see who gets the smallest pieces possible, okay? This can also be an energy release exercise, wrapping paper in pieces, tearing paper in pieces. Yeah, very small, tiny pieces. Okay, how are you getting with that? Good job. Okay, are you ready? Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, we now have a rain of pieces of paper. And now what we're going to do is to put trust back together. Okay, so now we're going to fix the puzzle. Okay, let's start here. How do we do this? Let's put trust back together. What do you think about this? Maybe a bit challenging. Maybe there's a lesson there. What do you think is the lesson? That trust is there. If it's there, don't destroy it, because it's a bit like putting poison in the water. It's very difficult to undo the destruction of trust. So my advice to avoid the mistake of being complacent and assuming that relationships take care of themselves is to do regular relationship checkups. It's like going to the dentist. Or if you have a car, maybe you get the car to be fixed or to maintain over time. Every 6 months, maybe you go to the dentist and you see how your teeth are. So make sure you proactively engage your counterparts. You build interdependence, the sense that we are better off dealing with each other than not dealing with each other. You build trust over time, and you don't destroy it. Next comes communication. Communication in negotiations is any exchange of information. So what could be mistakes here? Let's watch a video that shows us some of the problems of communication in negotiations and in life in general.
Hello. How much are they asking?
Well, that's a lot of money for a deck.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but you're getting robbed. Did you hear me? You're getting robbed. Ow! Stop!
AmeriQuest, an open-minded, equal opportunity lender.
You got to the down. Come on.
Patient has a fractured fibula, given a mild sedative. So I could be able to go home tomorrow.
Daddy's gonna be so excited.
That killed him.
Paging Dr. Palmer, Dr. Barbara Palmer.
So this is a mistake we do frequently in negotiations when we communicate, is that we believe we have this high self-esteem, we are overconfident, we believe that we are mind readers. We can read the minds of people. We can guess their intentions. We assume we know their intentions. And even worse than that, we assume they know our intentions. So sometimes we're so careless about communications because we communicate and we assume that other people will know perfectly what we had in mind when we were communicating. And this creates tremendous problems. So let me propose an exercise for you to do in the chat. We're going to use the chat in the webinar system. And this exercise is to figure what's the best solution for bad communication, for ineffective communication, which actually is asking questions. So I'm going to ask you what could be the most powerful questions you could ask. And you have a choice here. So on this slide, you have several types of questions. What questions, yes or no questions, where, why, which, multiple choice, when, how, who, how many. Please write on the chat the types of questions from this menu of questions that you think are the most powerful. And how do I define powerful? Let me put here a definition. And this comes from an article that you can click on when you get the slides, or you can search for it, The Art of Powerful Questions. Powerful questions generate curiosity. They stimulate reflection. They challenge assumptions, are thought-provoking, invite creativity, generate energy, channel attention. They stay with participants, touch deeper meanings, and generate more questions. So think about this menu of questions and write on the chat the ones you think are the most powerful. And I'm seeing some of you already writing there. Thanks for that. Let's get 20 seconds more to see how others respond to this question. What are the most powerful questions? Awesome. Okay, so now let's move to the opposite question, which is what are the last or the least powerful questions? Let's write on the chat the questions you think out of this menu are the ones who have less power in them. Yes or no questions. That's a quick answer, good answer. Not much comes from yes or no questions. Multiple choice. So I've asked these around the world, and the order of from most powerful to least powerful is typically always the same. And it's something that looks like this. Why at the top, how and what. Some people put it in more mixed ways or more similar levels. Then the who, when, and where your answer could be a person, a place, or a time. Which, multiple choice, which normally implies that there are a selection of things you can choose from, and then yes or no, which have just yes or no as possible answers. In my social enterprise sport impact, we learned over time that yes or no questions have zero value. Zero. You could think, oh, they have some value. I know if it's a yes or a no. No, you have no value at all. I remember a situation with my colleague, Virginia. We were preparing an event on Saturday, and this is Monday. We have weekly meeting. And I asked her, hey, Virginia, have you invited the people you want to have in the event for the event? And she said, yeah. And I thought, oh, great. Okay, this is sorted out. So on Saturday, we've invited them, so probably these people will show up. And on Saturday, no one shows up. And I asked her, Virginia, but on Monday I asked you, and you said, yes, you had invited people for the event. And she's like, did I say yes? I don't remember. So I learned that yeah means whatever, and no means whatever, yes means whatever. Don't ask yes or no questions, ask powerful, open-ended questions. So the advice here is to ask those powerful questions. Don't mind read. Ask truly open questions with the true intention to learn, and listen to the response and understand the response to minimize the mistakes in communication. Next comes interest. We're getting into the second stage of the negotiation map. Interests are what parties really care about, what's really important to those who negotiate. Their objectives, their goals, their intentions, their concerns, their fears, also what they don't want. And here, what could be the mistakes? There's a story, those who have taken courses with me know already, I'm sure, the story of the orange, the last orange in the house. Two sisters see the orange, the younger one grabs the orange, the older one also wants the orange, they start fighting for the orange. No, I want it, no, I grab it first, but I'm older. And it's a big fight, a big fuss about it. The mother arrives home, tired from work, grabs the orange, goes to the kitchen, gets a knife, cuts the orange in half, and gives one half to each daughter. And the mother is sorted out. And people think, okay, not too bad, each one had one half, no more noise. But the story doesn't end there. One of the sisters peels the orange, throws away half of the peel, and with half the pulp of the orange, squeezes it to make a little bit of a glass cup of orange juice. The other one peels the orange, throws away half of the pulp, and with half the peel, bakes half the recipe of an orange cake. So what's the problem here? The mother didn't ask what they really wanted. And they didn't ask each other what they really wanted. They wanted very different things, very compatible. They could have the whole orange, the whole pulp of the orange, the whole peel of the orange. Instead, they have 50% and they threw away 50%. And the problem is this, and this is why the icon for interest is the iceberg. We're looking at the tip of the iceberg, but we're not seeing the underlying part under the surface of the water. So we're looking at the position, not the interest. The positions are the strict demands we make to each other in negotiations. The interests are the underlying needs that we get when we ask why to those positions. So the problem here is that we tend to be, the mistake we do is to be superficial. We tend to assume we know what they really care about. An example of this is these negotiations, and I guess in this part of our world, maybe not many people are familiar with the faces in this picture. But the person in the middle, Marty Ahtisaari, was Nobel Peace Prize in 2008. A lot of the Nobel Peace Prize came because of his work mediating the dispute between the Aceh Free Movement, or Free Aceh Movement, and the Indonesian government. Aceh was fighting for independence of Aceh. The Free Aceh Movement was fighting for independence for 30 years. And in 2005, after months of new rounds of negotiations, they finally reached an agreement. And in the debrief of that agreement, the parties were sharing how Marty Ahtisaari, as mediator, has asked very powerful questions to them. Could be more open, so this is kind of a multiple choice question, not the most powerful one, but it was very powerful to reframe in their minds what they really wanted. He asked them, do you want to win And winning in this case, you imagine military government, military from the Indonesian government versus the Free Aceh movement, a guerrilla movement, fighting wars, throwing bullets at each other. Winning would be kill the enemy, probably. Or you want what? Or do you want peace? And peace meant development, meant ability to get the kids growing up in a peaceful environment. They could go to school, they could develop businesses, they could grow the economy, they could use their natural resources for the development of the Aceh region. And they ended up agreeing to Aceh becoming an autonomous region of Indonesia, not independent, but autonomous. Another example from this problem of positions and interests is also that sometimes we also assume we know what we really want. That's even more amazing and a bigger mistake. We assume we know what we want in negotiations. An example is my friend who has a startup, a web technology startup. And a couple of years ago, he asked me to coach him on his negotiations with a potential buyer of his business. He wanted to sell out. He had been running the business for a few years. He wanted to cash in, move to do something else, maybe start a new business. And he was negotiating hard with his biggest client who could buy him out and basically acquire the business. But they were not meeting his desired valuation. He wanted $5 million, and at some point they were discussing 2.5 million. Actually, euros. 5 million euros, 2.5 million euros. He ended up not having an agreement. And he ended up having to run the business for a couple more years. When I met with him a year later after those negotiations, he was a bit disappointed with himself. He said, no, in our coaching sessions, you asked me about my interests, and that was a great question. Actually, I realized later on, I didn't know what my interests were. I wanted peace of mind. I wanted more time with my family, less time with the startup. Yes, cash was important, so I could have peace of mind and no pressure to earn money. But 2.5 million, that would have been a great deal. And I was so focused on my position of the 5 million I wanted that I forgot what I really wanted. So the advice here is to be like this kid. Is to be the annoying child who asks, why? If someone tells you, I want $5 million for my startup, you can ask them, why do you want $5 million? What does it do for you to have $5 million? If you are the one asking for those $5 million, maybe you have to ask yourself, why am I asking for this? And why do they want to acquire my business? What for? What will they do with it? And then that helps us go from the tip of the iceberg, from the surface, go deeper and deeper and learn more about the true interests of the parties. Next, options. So we understand now the interests of the parties. We start coming up with solutions between the parties that could address those interests, could satisfy the interest, what they really want to achieve in that negotiation. What's the problem here? If we go back to the child, annoying child, maybe it's a bit a slightly older child, is that sometimes the problem is that we manipulate or get manipulated. We assume we need to buy relationship. What does that mean? We trade substance, what we're negotiating for, in exchange for a relationship. How does that connect with children? Well, imagine that children that's crying because they want a little sweet. What do? Maybe you give them a little sweet. So you're paying them to stop crying. They stop crying, but also they learn something. Children are very clever. They're always learning. What do they learn? They cry, they get a sweet. So maybe I should cry more, get more sweets. Maybe I cry even more, I get a cake. I cry even more, maybe I get a bicycle. I cry even more, maybe a motorbike, a car, an MBA, a house. It never ends. So basically we're rewarding bad behavior by buying out that bad behavior through substance, by paying them to have a different behavior. This connects with the challenge that we often face in negotiation, which is this. We sometimes feel that there is one choice between, should I be a bit like Mother Teresa and be more a giver in negotiations? Someone who compromises and gives away value in negotiations? Or should I be more like, who do you think is the other half of the slide? Trump, maybe. Should I be more like Trump? So should I be more a giver or a taker? Is it all about giving to others, or is it all about taking from others? Another way to put it could be, should I be more angel or devil? Or the nice one or the nasty one? So we assume we have this choice in negotiations. We forget that maybe there is another way. And another way is maybe we can be Nemo, not Mother Teresa, not Trump, but Nemo. Nemo, or the clownfish, lives in a symbiotic relationship with the anemones, where they protect each other from predators. So basically the advice here is that we should trade substance for substance. If I protect you, you protect me, or maybe that's relationship. If I provide you food, you provide me food, maybe that's substance. And we avoid trading substance for relationship or relationship for substance. We look for options for mutual gains, where by agreeing to do something together, both of us are earning something already, are getting value already for both of us. Next, legitimacy. We understood the interests of the parties. We explored options that could satisfy those interests. We need to choose which options are the appropriate, right, or fair ones. That's what legitimacy does to a negotiation. What's the challenge here? This could be part of the challenge, this cartoon. What do you think the blonde lady and the Muslim lady are thinking? They look at each other. Do they think very different ways? They have very different inputs. One is looking at a very covered woman. The other is looking at a very uncovered woman. The blonde lady is thinking, oh, everything covered but her eyes. What a cruel, male-dominated culture. What do you think the Muslim lady is telling herself? Basically the same. Nothing covered but her eyes. What a cruel, male-dominated culture. And this is the challenge with the legitimacy. Legitimacy is about getting references, benchmarks, traditions, precedents, market prices, rules, laws, regulations, something that gives meaning to a proposal that we put on the table on negotiation. The problem is that the meaning can be very different. Here we see an example of two very different images giving the same meaning. We can have the opposites in this picture here. And maybe you're familiar with this story of the blind man and the elephant. 6 blind men, they heard a lot about the elephant, but they didn't know what an elephant was. Finally, they had a chance to see, well, not to see, but to touch an elephant. They don't see, right? They're blind. So, and each one of them went to touch the same thing, the elephant, same being, but they touched different parts of it. So the blind man who touched the trunk thought, oh, it's a snake. Obvious, it's a snake. The blind man who touched the tusk thought, oh, it's a spear. Clearly, it's a spear. No doubts about that. The one who touched the ear felt that, oh, the elephant is a fan. The one touching the leg thought, oh, actually, the tree is a very solid trunk of the tree. The one touching the side of the elephant thought, oh, it's a wall. This is hard. It's impossible to move. Surely a wall. And finally, the 6th blind man touched the tail and thought, oh, it's a rope, clearly. So the 6th blind man, with the same information, had very different meaning attributed to that elephant. So a mistake we do in win-win negotiations, often we look for legitimacy, but we are biased. We actually assume we are great decision makers, but we are often very irrational and subject to cognitive biases. And here's a list of cognitive biases that I'm not going to go through. If you are curious, when you get the handouts from this webinar, you can click on this page and you can access an article about these 20 different cognitive biases. My invitation to you is that you think about building awareness of these cognitive biases, learn about them, spot them in your day-to-day, and take multiple perspectives when you're negotiating. Basically, see the elephant or touch the whole elephant as opposed to touching just one part of it. Next element in the map is alternatives. Alternatives are our walk-away solutions, the ways we can satisfy our interests without having a deal with our counterpart, but having a deal with someone else. What happens here? Let's see a short video that helps us see situations where we don't want to be in.
Hello, boys. Seems like you've had a busy day.
What's this? This is just some stuff we found.
There are 2 blue macaws out there, and I need your multitude of eyes to help me find them.
Oh, yeah? What's in it for us?
Well, that's a fair question. Let's discuss it. I certainly see your point, but what could I possibly do for you in return?
Save me!
Oh, well, that's a thought, yeah. But is this enough? I don't want to feel like I'm cheating you.
Help me! We'll do it! Save me, please! Save me!
All right, you've twisted my wing. Deal. Well then, any more questions? Go do your monkey business.
I would not say this is an example of a win-win negotiation. That's not what I'm claiming here. But it's just an example of a situation where maybe imagine you're the monkey and you actually want to have a win-win negotiation with the bird, and you're put in a situation where basically you have no choice. Either you die or you accept to do whatever the bird is asking you to do. It's a bit like someone pointing a gun to your head. You don't want to die. Using a gun is clearly a win-lose strategy to negotiate. But perhaps you could have done something about it beforehand. So the problem is that we have this tunnel vision, and we assume we must be faithful to the other side often in our negotiations. When we're starting a partnership or a personal relationship, we think that we have to be faithful no matter what. We have to be faithful and loyal to that other party. We assume that we have no alternatives, and we need to reach an agreement in that negotiation. Nothing else is okay. We forget that we could have a parachute. If the monkey had a parachute, the monkey would not be in a position where he would be desperate to, please save me, I'll do whatever you want. So my invitation to you is to think about what parachute you can have in your negotiations. Not do the mistake of having this tunnel vision of you enter a negotiation, you need a deal with that potential partner, that client, that supplier, with your people you connect with in your personal level as well, your colleagues, your boss. Not necessarily you need to reach an agreement. There are alternatives. And to inspire us on that, let me ask you to think, who do you think is the wealthiest person on earth? Think about that. And actually the wealthiest person on earth in terms of dollars has been on the news recently for reasons that are beyond his wealth. There's actually Jeff Bezos, whose net worth, I think, is coming down by maybe a quarter or a third because he's getting a divorce from his wife. But anyway, I think he still will maintain his wealth over $100 billion US dollars, and therefore is considered the wealthiest man on earth. But that depends on the definition of wealth that you use. If you define wealth as how much I have divided by how much I need, then maybe Jeff Bezos with his jets and his expensive houses and so on, and his businesses, maybe he's not the most low-cost person in the world. Maybe the sadhus that roam around India everywhere, maybe they are the wealthiest people on earth, actually. They need basically nothing materially. Why am I talking about sadhus? I'm not inviting us to be win-win negotiators, but by all becoming sadhus and just roaming around with poor clothes and begging for food from everyone around us. But I'm suggesting you to build alternatives that can be a source of value. By having alternatives, I'm not desperate for a deal, therefore I can build a better deal. And I can also work with my counterpart to improve the deal so that both of us are more satisfied. It's also good that my counterparts, actually my supplier, my client, my partner, they also have alternatives. That will stimulate us not to be complacent in our relationship and to improve value over time. The deal that we agree on with our counterpart has to be better than alternatives. That's one of the basics of negotiations that sometimes we make the mistake of forgetting. And we actually enter deals where we would be better off by having no deal at all. Doing nothing is always an alternative that is there. The $0 approach, the approach of the sadhus, also is always there. You're a social entrepreneur. You want to implement your project. You want to make it happen. You have no money. No one is paying for your service. No partner is putting financial resources on the project. You think, oh, I need to give up. I'm out. I have no alternatives. Or I have just to comply with all the demands that my potential partners make to me. Maybe you can do it on your own. Maybe you can think of, instead of mobilizing dollars, you mobilize other resources, facilities, people, volunteers, material resources that people can contribute to your project. That's the way to build alternatives and to be more empowered to do whatever you want with your project and with your life. Finally, commitment, the last element in the negotiation map. Commitment is about any agreement between the parties in a negotiation, what they will do or will not do. What's the problem here? This is the problem often with commitment. The mistake we make is often that we actually get married with our partner, with our supplier, with our client, with our people we're negotiating with too early. We assume that we need to reach agreement close the deal very early. We are early committers. And what's the problem with that? What's the problem of signing a contract very early or shaking hands very early? The problem is just that we are basically nurturing a deal that looks like a bonsai. Why is the deal like a bonsai? Because a deal where we close very early, we shake hands very early, is a deal where we don't discuss interest much, we don't know much about what we really care about, what they really care about. We don't brainstorm solutions, options that we could agree on. We don't explore ways to legitimize the right, appropriate, fair options. So the deal creates just a little bit of value. It's like a bonsai that's a full potential tree, could be a huge tree, but it's put in a small vase and it's cut, trimmed in ways that keep it small for life. The bonsai has all the potential of being a big tree, but stays small. A great value creative deal has all the potential of being great and high value for everyone, but if we commit early, it stays small. So I'm bringing back that negotiation about the ACE peace process. Again, we have Martti Tisaari here in the center of representatives from the Free ACE movement. This was in Helsinki, in Finland, in 2005 during the negotiations. I'm sure that the snow also helped. That's not a factor I'm going to talk about, but it's cold. They're coming from Aceh, where it's warm. They're fighting. They come to a different environment where it's cold, it's freezing almost. They have actually to calm down and negotiate. But another thing that the parties said that Martti was repeating the whole time that enabled them to find a deal and reach the memorandum of understanding between the government and the Free ACE movement, the guerrilla movement, was this saying of nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Meaning what? We may be here exploring solutions, brainstorming, figuring what we could do together. It doesn't matter what we put on the table as a potential solution, as long as we haven't signed the MOU yet, we haven't shaken hands yet. Nothing is agreed until the whole package is agreed. He was asking the Free ACE movement to consider the possibility of Aceh not being an independent country. That was a big concession for the GAM, the Free ACE movement. But the fact that they were looking at a package where part of the package would mean perhaps we have only autonomy, but we have autonomy with rights to have our own political parties and have access to our own oil and gas resources in our region, maybe we can agree to that. That package may make sense. The same exact sentence was used in another negotiation I've been participating in, the treaty between Timor-Leste and Australia, the Maritime Boundary Treaty between the two countries, defining finally the boundary between Timor-Leste and Australia, separating the two countries in the sea and dividing to whom oil and gas resources on each side of the border belong to. Peter Jensen, the chairman of the Conciliation Commission, kept repeating along the way in those negotiations, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. This was again an invitation to be creative, to be flexible, to consider different possibilities and figure what we could do together to bring more value to Timor-Leste and Australia. Commitment is a lot about being a kind of a witch with a crystal ball. Commitment is about predicting the future. We're signing a contract now, shaking hands now, anticipating that the future will look good for us and for the other side. So my invitation to you is that you don't commit too early on the deal, on the substance, but you actually commit early on a win-win process. So you don't commit on the substance of the deal, but you commit on the process for that deal, the way you're going to reach the deal. And basically the process I'm proposing to you is, of course, the negotiation map, to go through these 7 elements and create that future, which is the best way to predict the future is to create it. Create the future by negotiating, starting with the bridge, relationship and communication, discussing value, interests, options, legitimacy, and finally making a decision, either alternatives or commitment. So these are the 7 elements, and here is a summary. And in summary, the biggest mistakes we make in win-win negotiations are to make assumptions. We assume too much. So instead of assuming that relationship will always be there and be complacent, we should do preventive relationship checkups. Instead of assuming in communication that we know their intentions and they know our intentions, we should ask powerful questions. Ask why, how, what. Instead of assuming in interest that we know what they really want and they know what we really want and we know what we really want, be the annoying child. Ask why. Instead of trading relationship for substance, don't do that. Don't trade relationship for substance, trade substance for substance, relationship for relationship. If you're angry with me, I'm going to ask you about your feelings and we're going to discuss your feelings. I'm not going to give you $100 to fix your feelings. Legitimacy. Instead of being biased and assuming that the meaning in the negotiation is the same for everyone, build awareness of our cognitive biases and be better seeing the elephant and touching the whole elephant. Alternatives. Instead of being committed to a deal because we need to be loyal, faithful to that counterparty, let's build alternatives and use them as a source for more value for us and also for others. And commitment. Instead of committing early to the deal, commit early to the process. Create the future through that process. There are questions. Sometimes people are overwhelmed and cannot handle more than yes, no questions at a certain moment. How do you proceed in that case? Well, if people are overwhelmed, then I'm going to give you my answers, but I'm going to invite you to think about your own answers, of course. But if someone is overwhelmed in a negotiation and they can only take yes or no questions, perhaps it's not the moment to negotiate. Perhaps it's the moment to discuss with them when they want to negotiate, what could be a good moment to have a more profound, deeper conversation. And maybe you could say, oh, but they're not really willing to that. They're in a hurry. They just want to get a deal done. So maybe we have to persuade them, negotiate with them that actually having a deeper conversation will enable us to create more value and satisfy more of their interests and therefore having a more valuable deal for them at the end. So it might be worth it not negotiating today. They're overwhelmed, they're too busy. Let's meet tomorrow, next week, next month. Another question, when the other part wants to impose its point of view, what to do? Well, I'm going to translate wants to impose its point of view as a more win-lose type of negotiation, where the party imposing sounds a bit like they're using power to force us to accept their point of view. And that may mean that they're saying either, you go my way or no way. My advice to you is to encourage them. So that basically means if you look at the slide with the negotiation map, they're probably giving you a take it or leave it proposal. Look, either you commit on this is my view and you have to agree on this, or I'll walk away. I'll go and pursue my alternatives. The invitation you can explore making to the other parties, can we come back, instead of going to the action stage of the negotiation, can we come back to the value stage? Can we transform that discussion from agreeing or not to their point of view into a discussion about interests? Why do you want me to agree on this? Why is this important? What would it do for you if I agree to your point of view? Or, well, I could agree to your point of view, but maybe I could also agree to B, C, and D points of view. What do you think about that? Maybe we can trade something here. Or maybe you help them, invite them to justify with legitimacy. Why would you say, where does your point of view come from? Why would you say that your point of view is the fair one, the appropriate one, the right one? Which in summary is all about asking questions. Can unstated interests be part of a win-win negotiation? I'm not sure I understand fully the question, but my understanding is unstated interests being part of a win-win negotiation. I would say that unstated interests are always there. I mean, everyone has zillions of interests in a negotiation, zillions of things that you could want, desire, goals, objectives, things you might not want, fears, concerns. Some you might be willing to share with others. Some you may think, well, actually, this would be exposing me too much, and I prefer to keep this to myself. Not necessarily to take advantage of the other, but maybe because I think I don't have trust enough in this relationship to be able to share all these things and open up my life and my heart to the other party. So that could be an unstated interest that's part of a win-win negotiation. Win-win doesn't mean that I have to open my heart, open my life, and be an open book to everyone. It means that I'll take risks, yes, but they are measured risks. If there is trust enough that I can share everything I want to share about my negotiation, I might share all those interests, and I would not have maybe unstated interests. Although probably there would be ones that I'm not aware of that I'm not stating anyway. So I would say there's a risk-reward evaluation there. When you look at your interests and you think, should I disclose them or not? That should be a conscious choice. I'll disclose my interests for several reasons. Like, could be to invite them also to disclose their interests. Could be to show them what I value so that they can bring me value. Because if I tell them this is important to me, perhaps they have ideas of options that will bring value to me. Perhaps it's about value creation. Perhaps it's about what we call value discovery, understanding what we care about. And perhaps some interests we think that they are too critical or expose me too much and should not be shared. And therefore, they will remain unstated for a long time until maybe I build enough trust to be able to share them. Culture, could they influence the process? Well, definitely. And you could see that maybe more in when we talked about legitimacy earlier. We could see the blonde lady and the Muslim lady. And the difference of culture meant that they had a very different meaning associated with actually similar meaning associated with very different images of a very dressed up or covered woman and a very uncovered woman. And in communication, we have many issues that are coming out from culture. Maybe that could be a subject for a future webinar, but culture definitely affects a lot of communication and therefore affects the way we understand each other and therefore the results we can achieve in win-win or even win-lose negotiations. There's some other questions out there. Does the end ever justify the means in a win-win situation? Okay, maybe instead of answering that question, let me maybe comment on the win-win situation label. So win-win is an adjective, and we often use win-win or win-lose associated with situations. Oh, this is a win-win situation, this is a win-lose situation. Or sometimes we use it with outcomes. Oh, this is a win-win outcome or a win-lose outcome. I would say that labeling a situation as win-lose is probably a bad idea. Because what we're doing with that is we're saying, oh, this is a win-lose situation, therefore nothing I can do. I'll have to negotiate win-lose. I'll have to use power or to be subject to the power of the other. There's no way I'm going to be able to make this a win-win. Win-win situation is a more empowering label because I'm saying, oh, everything actually can be a win-win situation or can be a win-win scenario, meaning what? That I'll choose, it's my choice, a win-win strategy, a win-win approach, a win-win process, a win-win intention or attitude to get what I want. Meaning I'm choosing not to use power to get what I want. So does the end ever justify the means in a win-win situation? I don't know. I think we will have to go and analyze specific situations. I think what I invite you to do is to take into account the risks and the rewards associated with a choice when you approach a negotiation. So if you think it's a win-win negotiation, you chose, I'm not going to use power, I'm going to negotiate win-win, you have to think, should I take this action or say these words, which I think maybe have certain risks. If the risks are very high, rewards are very little, probably I shouldn't say that or do that. If I decide that actually I analyze and I think that the rewards are very high and risks are very limited or can be minimized, then I should do it. So I think more than do the ends justify the means, I think it's more about each action. Does it fit my overall strategy choice of not using power or using power, whatever my choice is? And if it does fit, what are the risks, rewards involved in it? Should I take that action or say those words or not? Any other questions? How can we handle a scenario where the other party keeps bringing power to the table in a negotiation? That's tough, and probably that's something that happens a lot in our lives. Not everyone has taken a workshop on win-win negotiations. Not everyone has done a webinar where we talk about a win-win approach. And I would say from my experience working with clients around the world and participants in workshops and trainings around the world is that win-lose is probably much more common than win-win. So I'm sure that we can find situations where people are back with power the whole time. The two key strategies I invite you to have is one I've mentioned before. If you're facing a take it or leave it type of negotiator, ask questions to bring that negotiation back to the circle of why do you want that, what for do you want that, what else could we do, what could be a right appropriate choices to an agreement. You may feel, oh, but they're not willing to listen. You have to stimulate interdependence. You have to stimulate them to see that actually by working with you and maybe sharing more about why they care about things, you'll be able also to deliver more value to them. I give you an example maybe from one of my clients, and I saw that my client actually is in this webinar. Hi there, I'm not going to say your name, but one of my clients hired me and my colleagues some years ago to work on a big automotive procurement project. And they told us about their intention to move from a win-lose culture where they would be more used to use power because they were a big automotive manufacturer and therefore used to squeeze suppliers a lot. And they wanted to be more win-win or perhaps even fully win-win. I don't know, that was something I think we never discussed fully what the image at the end would be. And they shared the story of how they squeezed some suppliers so much, some key suppliers that were providing key parts to make their cars. They were delivered in their factory and they could assemble cars in their factory with those parts. They squeezed these suppliers so much that the margins were so thin or negative at some point that they went bankrupt. They went bankrupt and that meant, oh, this is going to disrupt production. How are we going to produce cars next? They had to buy out those suppliers and run those suppliers, maybe until now, at least last time I talked with my clients a year ago or so, or something like that, they were still managing those suppliers to be able to produce cars with high costs for management, probably higher costs and lower margins for my clients, which means that squeezing so much ended up being counterproductive to themselves. So maybe that supplier, if the supplier had taken a win-win negotiations course, would have convinced my client, their client, the buyer of the parts, to see that it was in their own interest, the big automotive manufacturer, to have a more win-win negotiation. Is there any difference in those 7 steps for negotiation that involve 2 parties only and for negotiating among multi-parties? Thanks, Tracy, for the question. The answer, of course, is yes. Multi-party negotiations can make the 7 elements that we've discussed here much more complicated. You have many relationships to deal with. You have many ways to communicate and many cultures involved. There are zillions of different interests around the table. There's a matrix of interests and parties that are very different, and it's difficult to understand that, and people are less eager to share those interests. That could be a topic for a full, maybe semester course on multi-party negotiations. So in these, everything is more complex because of the multiple relationships. I see a pattern of questions. And I'm very happy with that takeaway because definitely questions are the most powerful tool ever invented for negotiation and perhaps for life. Asking questions helps us learn if they are genuine, interested questions, helps us understand what others want, what we want ourselves, why is that's definitely a key question to ask. Some questions about some insights about alternatives. It's good to have them. Don't forget your parachute so you can have, don't be so dependent on the other party when you're negotiating. Doing nothing is always there. It's better to have a no deal than a bad deal. Very good, powerful lessons there. Let me thank you. Maybe there are some more questions, but let me thank you and remind you that we're asking for feedback. There's a webinar evaluation form whose link was shared on the chat. And also there's a next webinar with my colleagues Fred Fedas-Vital and Rafik Daoud on May 6th on digital marketing. So sign up for that. Thanks so much for attending, and it was enjoyable to be here, although not live with you, but it was great to see some of your names and faces, and I look forward to catching up with you, and do get in touch if you need any help in your negotiations. Thank you very much.